Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, welcome back to The Tom Woods Show. It's episode 2580 with our old friend Daniel McAdams, who is Executive Director of the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity, and of course co-host of the Ron Paul Liberty Report. So you have seen Daniel McAdams many, many times over these past number of years. And I wanted to catch up with him on what's going on in the world and what's going on with the Ron Paul Institute, which is a very, very important thing, by the way, especially as we get to the end of the year and people are thinking about their end of year gifts. I'll tell you, I have been a donor to the Ron Paul Institute, and I'm very happy to do that. I feel like this, along with the curriculum, the homeschool curriculum, is really Ron Paul's living legacy. And we want that legacy to continue. So please, please do consider ronpaulinstitute.org it's a very, very streamlined outfit. And you know, Ron Paul doesn't go around, being driven around in a limousine with the money you send him. I mean, it is a very, very shoestring operation. And what they do is vastly out of proportion to the funds that they raise. Anyway, sorry about this, Daniel. I'm getting distracted. Welcome to the show.
You're too kind. Thank you, Tom. It's great to be back on your fantastic show.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, let's see. Where should we start? We'll start in domestic policy here for a minute, but the Ron Paul Institute deals with both peace and prosperity. Well, let's start with prosperity, and let's talk about maybe a topic that people are getting a little tired of hearing about, but I'm not. I'm not tired of hearing about it. And that's this Department of Government Efficiency that Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy have been tasked with administering. And what is interesting to us with you here from the Ron Paul Institute is that, of course, this, whatever we want to call it, this institution has brought Ron Paul back into more of the spotlight because Elon Musk has openly said that he would be very happy to have Ron Paul's collaborative work as part of this. And, then there was a funny video that Ron and Rand put out not that long ago around Thanksgiving, where Rand has got this stack of papers and he's saying, Dad, I've come up with some good ideas for cutting out government waste and whatever. And Ron says, what? He says, why don't you start with this? And he's got these huge boxes of papers, right? So let's talk about that. I mean, you've talked to Dr. Paul about this. What are his thoughts?
He's excited and he's very happy. The whole thing first started on a lark. And, he's been around the block. He knows what politics is like. And he also knows that the Trump campaign openly attempted to be friendly with libertarians. He spoke at the Libertarian Party National Convention. He was welcomed there. He was jeered by some, but he was cheered by a lot. And that shows a heck of a lot for him to have come and done. So he obviously understands that the numbers are there and it was important. So when this whole thing kind of came up before the election, Ron and I, Dr. Paul and I were sitting there and we thought, this is kind of neat. I think Ron was on David Gronowski's show and David asked him, hey, if you were asked to participate in the Department of Government Efficiency, would you? He said, sure, it'd be interesting. I don't want a formal title, but I'm happy to be part of it. And so we thought before the election, it was kind of, yeah, we get it. It's politics. But that's why we were very surprised after the election that it continued. And, it's continued in the form of helpful tweets from Ron Paul. And, I'll give your listeners a scoop if they want to know how it works. And nobody knows this.
Oh, I would love to know.
Ron Paul comes up with an idea. He doesn't like typing very much. And so he reads it into his phone and he texts it over to me, have a look at it, and put it up if you think it works. And so these are absolutely 100% his ideas. And we put them up, we see what happens. And I told him when we proposed to him to be more active on his Twitter account, he was somewhat skeptical, but I did tell him, look, some of these tweets are going to go through the roof and some are going to fall flat and we're not going to really understand why. So I think he gets it. And so some of them have gone viral. I mean, he did one over the weekend. I think it was on Saturday, offering a suggestion to the government efficiency department to get rid of all foreign aid. And then Elon Musk retweeted saying, I can assure you, something like we're looking into all of this. It'll be done with transparency and we're looking into all of this. It'll be done with transparency and went through the roof. Then other people picked it up. I think Fox and Friends picked it up. And Elon retweeted something else saying Ron Paul wants to get rid of foreign aid. And Elon said, Ron isn't wrong. And that got 40 million views yesterday. So,
and then Bill Kristol jumped in to say Ron is wrong. But Bill Kristol is the wrongest guy in the history of the world, right? He's wrong on everything.
If we're on his right side, then we have big problems.
Yeah, that's right. I think it was, Elon retweeted that old statement by Dr. Paul that foreign aid is poor people in rich countries giving money to rich people in poor countries. I think he retweeted that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was great. It was that one. And it was another one on basically government efficiency needs to look inside the Pentagon. You need to audit the Pentagon and figure out what's going on in there. And he retweeted that. And so the fact that Elon is retweeting these things that are sort of the untouchable areas by previous Republican administrations, I think is a very good sign. If he's going to look at foreign aid, if he's going to look at the Pentagon's bloated budget, that's a great sign. And so, it's really great to see. And I can tell you what, Ron Paul is very excited about it. He enjoys doing it. This is what he likes doing. So his brain is constantly thinking up ideas.
That is great. That is good. Now, so you interact with him on a regular basis because of the show. And now look, we all know he's Ron Paul. And so on some level, we feel like he's invincible. We know that he's been physically fit his whole life, but he is 89 years old. And yet he still seems, not like at 89 you can't do anything, but he's super informed. He knows everything he's read every article and so on and on. So how do you do that show, by the way? Do you say to him, we really should talk about X, or does he write to you and say, we really should talk about A or B?
Yeah, it's back and forth. I'll usually get up first thing and I'll try to think, because we want to try to keep it very topical.
Yeah.
It's sort of morphed into a news analysis show. It wasn't that when we started back in 2015, almost 10 years ago, but it sort of morphed into it. And we often, so a typical conversation, I forget what the event was. The pardoning of Hunter Biden last week. So our approach would be, okay, everyone's talking about it. It's probably a good topic because people are interested. However, we're not just anybody, so we need to talk about it with the Ron Paul spin, with the Ron Paul view, with this sort of this kind of prism through which we look at the world. All of us libertarians or whatever we want to call ourselves, And so we try to say, do we have any special spice we can put into it? And if it's like, nah, then off to the next one. So he'll send me some things. I'll send him some things. We'll get together about an hour and a half before and compare all of our notes and articles. And what do you think will be our best lead story? What people will pay attention to. Should we put this in and that? And to be honest, I'm always the one arguing for a shorter show because my brain just can't digest as much of it. He's always he thinks that we're somehow letting the audience down if we don't do 3 full topics a day. So that's kind of our only little point of contention when it comes to that.
So this domestic stuff about talking about cutting spending or cutting waste is kind of the way they're putting it. I've done a little bit of discussion of this on the show, and we've all recognized that it's easy to point to oddball line items in the federal budget and act as if, well, the problem is that we have all these oddball line items, and if we could just get rid of those, but we know it's going to take a little bit more effort than that, which is why I myself kind of just lost hope that spending would ever be brought under control. And no one has the vested interests are all in favor of keeping the spending. So it's very, very hard. You'd have to have a lot more ideologically charged people who are really, really committed to this issue on philosophical grounds than I think we have. And so I've just kind of given up on it. But maybe there's life in the old thing yet. So we'll see. But in terms of foreign policy, now that can be changed just with a change of administration if we want to. And in general, that doesn't happen. You get a change of administration, it's the same old foreign policy. But in principle, given how presidentially directed much of our foreign policy is, even though that's not how it was envisioned constitutionally, a new president can inject new life into American foreign policy if he wants to, and change the direction of it if he wants to. So Trump gets in, and then it's time to appoint his cabinet. And then, for heaven's sake, what do we see here?
Well, maybe better than last time, in terms of people who think a little bit outside the box. But I was hoping, for example, my good friend Doug McGregor, who I'm sure you know his work well, and I was hoping for a lead role for him. Now, maybe not Secretary of Defense, but I was certainly hoping something like National Security Advisor, which is a fascinating position. It doesn't require Senate confirmation, and you're right there in the room. And it would have been a good counterbalance to some of the more, let's say, hawkish people, including his National Security Advisor Waltz, his nominated Secretary of Defense Hegseth, little Marco Rubio. It would be good to have more of a counterbalance. So in that respect, it's disappointing. But there's the old saying: only Nixon can go to China. Maybe only these war hawks can dismantle things. And there are a lot of things that could save money. So it's good for the Department of Government Efficiency, but also do the right thing. Now, another friend of mine, I'm sure you know, Kelly Vlahos, did a great piece for the American Conservative, I think last week. Dr. Paul, Ron and I did a show about it, which is, hey, DOGE, if you want to cut some wasteful spending, cut out the National Endowment for Democracy. And this is it's a drop in the barrel. It's only like $1 billion a year or whatever. But they go around the world doing terrible anti-American things. They rig elections. They put out fake news constantly. They get people hurt and killed. I guarantee you they're behind the protests in Georgia right now, trying to overthrow that elected government. They do terrible, terrible things that make the rest of the world hate us. So it's a no-brainer to get rid of this. And there are plenty of other things like this.
Sometimes even if it's not that much money at stake, it's still, first of all, the symbolism of it. If somebody came in and shut that thing down, that would be an interesting bellwether. I think that would tell us something about what we can expect in the future. And then secondly, some of the damage that's done in the world is done without spending money. Sometimes presidents just say stupid things. They don't spend any money, but they say stupid things that encourage stupid behavior. Or you have this agency that spends only $1 billion, but good grief, do they undermine everything or do they encourage all the worst kinds of things? And by the way, that reminds me, on Twitter, I'm coming across people who think that people like, I guess, Dr. Paul, but also Scott Horton, our friend, are attributing to the CIA and the American intelligence apparatus powers that they only wish they had. So that whenever there's unrest around the world, they say, people like us will attribute it to the CIA. The CIA is probably behind that. And they say, the CIA only wishes it could control events the way you people say. What's actually happening in Syria is that the people have risen up against an oppressive regime. And you, isolationists, you refuse to recognize that these people have agency, and they have summoned their energy to grab hold of their own destiny here. And it's not the CIA, it's their own power. Like, what do you think about that kind of critique?
And these are people who know absolutely nothing about Syria. They've never been to Syria. They've never read a history of Syria. I mean, it's so preposterous to think that you know the intricacies of a civilization thousands of miles away when your knowledge is cursory at best. At the very least, have the humility of saying, I don't know. I don't know what's going on in Syria. I don't know the complexities of life in Syria. All I do know that is if we do get involved, it will mess things up because we don't know. It'd be like if you don't know how to cook and you start putting together stuff to make a cake, it's not going to turn out right. So the idea that the CIA is behind everything, maybe they're not. But we have plenty of objectively true history. The CIA itself declassifies things that they did in the 50s to overthrow governments and worse, and assassinations and what have you. So if you believe that they were doing this terrible stuff in the 50s and they never got caught or shut down, if they think that somehow now in the 2020s, they're like, man, we can't do that. That's not cool. No, their budget has quintupled or whatever the word is that they have, and it's all for doing nefarious things. So are they behind everything? I don't know. Do they have the resources to be behind everything? Yes. So we should assume that they are. And that's why our argument should be shut down, that at least that part of the CIA that's involved in covert action. I do think I'm not as radical of an anarchist to think that we don't need to have some intelligence collection capabilities. And maybe it won't be called the CIA. Maybe it'll be called something else. We do need that part, but we don't need the part that goes around the world overthrowing governments and killing people.
Hey everybody, let's take a minute to thank our sponsor, Persist SEO. If you're getting buried by your competition online, then build your brand, your reputation, and your lead flow with digital marketing by Persist SEO. If you're a small local business trying to compete against large companies in the service industry, then increase your visibility with Persist SEO. What if you have low or no leads coming in on a consistent basis? Well, then website search engine and conversion optimization can help move the needle to a more prosperous business model for you. Are you tired of cold calling and networking? Use your website as a lead generation engine. What if you're not showing up for your services in the search engines? Well, get found with Persist SEO Expert Search Engine Optimization. All you have to do is call 770-580-3736 or visit them at ineedseo.help for a free website audit and consultation. That's 770-580-3736 or ineedseo.help. Our friend Bob Murphy, the economist, said in part on quote-unquote X, he said, "Attention partisans, you now have 24 hours to become experts on Syria."
I saw that post.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you're hearing a lot of it. You're hearing a lot of it. And people aren't satisfied when someone like me says, I don't know. I've been studying Syria. I was extremely 24/7 in 2011, trying to understand everything I could about it. But I don't know at all. And anyone who says they do know doesn't know. But those who know don't tell.
I remember reading in it might have been in Liberty or Equality. It's one of the books by Eric von Kuhnelt-Ledeen. And he was not a Democrat. And I mean Democrat with a small d.
Yes.
And I remember in that book at one point, he was saying, now let's imagine we had a presidential debate and somebody raises a very, very thorny issue of foreign policy or something. And one side responds with the usual patriotic slogans, but the other side wants to give a really considered answer and says, you know, the issue you raise involves so many complicated factors that it would be irresponsible of me to give you a glib answer. I would like to take some time and contemplate your question, considering all the factors at work, and come back to you with a more thorough, answer. He said that person would be booed off the stage.
Boring.
That's obviously the correct answer.
Yeah, boring. Exactly.
Yeah, right. That's no fun. Somebody admitting he doesn't know and he needs to go assemble more information. I mean, it's just crazy. Whereas the other guy knows 3 sentences worth because his briefing just gave him the 3 sentences.
Yeah, exactly. That's the case.
So what do you think about, I mean, I know this is at this point kind of, let's say, old news, but it's not old news in the sense that it's still in the headlines. They're still coming after Tulsi Gabbard. We've now got this thing saying there are like 100 people in the intelligence agencies saying you can't have Tulsi Gabbard. That's why we want her, because 100 people would say we shouldn't have her. I mean, I want them to say that. That is the best endorsement we could ask for. I mean, what else would have to happen before you start to be skeptical of these agencies? What do you think about her prospects?
Well, I hope they're good, because the funny thing is that this isn't the Tulsi Gabbard of 10 years ago either. You know, she's not the progressive she was. She's not the peacenik she was. And I'm not saying this to discredit her whatsoever. I think she's probably Trump's best pick, for sure. But she's not the radical they claim she is. This is weird. Oh yeah, she went to meet Assad. Shouldn't we be talking to people? You know, that's the whole point. Of staying out of wars is to talk to people. You know, jaw instead of war. So the fact that you're right, it's the greatest endorsement of her. The fact that people like Bill Kristol are taking the vapors over the idea that she would come in there. But frankly, I like Tulsi. I've met her. I've spoken with her. She had a very long talk with Dr. Paul, by the way, about a year or so ago. And I didn't sit in on the talk, but I was in the room. She's very intelligent. She's very interested in hearing people's opinions. And that makes her 1,000 times better than anyone else in the game. She's very, very interested and informed. The fact that I do like her makes me worry that if she gets in that, God, you wouldn't want to wish that job on your worst enemy. Which, could you imagine going in there, and cleaning out the Augean stables and the next day they're refilled? I mean, I would not, I mean, the backstabbers, the psychopaths, the sociopaths who make up our intelligence community. No, there are a lot of good people there, but there are a lot of psychos too. So poor Tulsi, if she gets it, it's almost worse than if she doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, of course, I would love to see her get in there and do a fantastic job. So, we can only hope. I realized there was one more thing I wanted to add about Syria, if I may, because of something I posted. And I was saying to you, well, we're going to be recording this and it'll come out a couple of days later. And who knows what could happen in Syria, in 48 hours. So, but there are certain general principles we can hold fast to and know that they are going to remain true, come what may. And one of them is this, that I myself posted. You should all follow me at Thomas E. Woods, by the way, on so-called X. I will never be able to, maybe I have conceded not to call it Twitter, but I don't know. I don't think I can get rid of so-called in front of X, such a terrible name. Anyway, I wrote this. I wonder how long it'll be before we start hearing admissions from neocons that the wonderful intentions in Syria have gone wrong, yielding unintended consequences that nobody could have foreseen. I mean, do we have to, as Ralph Raico would say, are we to be spared nothing? Do we have to keep going through the same thing over and over and over, for heaven's sake? Good grief.
Yeah, I remember Ahmad Chalabi, he said, we were heroes in error.
Yes, yeah, right. Well,
that's exactly what you're right. You're absolutely right. And what's to me is astonishing, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if this, this Jolani fellow who's now taken over, seems to have taken over at least part of Syria. He still has a $10 million price on his head from our own State Department, by the way. You probably saw the wanted poster, stop this terrorist. And Biden goes on TV and say, we got to give him some money. So I don't know what's going to happen, but it's very astonishing to me, having lived through the war on terror, as you know, Tom, and what those early 2000s were like. It's amazing having lived through that, seeing, the cognoscenti, the chattering class talking about how wonderful it is that an Al-Qaeda guy took over Syria. I didn't think that was the end goal. I didn't have that one in my bingo.
A guy with a $10 million bounty on his head. So when Biden goes to give him the money, maybe he could also say to the State Department, hey, where's my 10 million? I found him for you.
At least 10% for the big guy. Come on.
Oh, that's a good point, right? I mean, he knows the drill.
I was just going to say, Max Blumenthal put out a hilarious post on X, Twitter.
Yes.
Saying, now that we know where the guy is, which of us is going to go collect that 10 million?
Yes. It's absolutely crazy. Now, I'm sure you've covered it on the Liberty Report, but I still want to get a little bit of information about Dr. Paul's opinions on the health side of things. In terms of, yes, of course, the most, well, let's say, high-profile appointment relating to health is Health and Human Services with RFK Jr. But I was particularly interested to see at the FDA, Dr. Marty McCary nominated, and then for National Institutes of Health, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya. And of course, Dr. Paul, being not simply a libertarian, but also a physician himself, I assume he watches developments like this with particular interest. And what has he had to say about that?
We were thrilled. I mean, he was thrilled. And these are the heroes that we were touting, as you were too, Tom, in the depths of COVID. These were the lights. These were the beacons in the darkness for us. And watching them get savaged by the establishment and still coming back for more and sticking to the truth. They were great heroes. I mean, those are probably, I don't follow health as closely, obviously, as he does or others, but these are probably the best two picks when it comes to that. And it's kind of a stick it in your face to the people who ruined our lives. And we've talked about Jay Bhattacharya. And in fact, we met with Robert Malone over at the Mises Institute a couple of months ago and had a nice long talk with him. But I know that he's thrilled about this. He's really thrilled about it.
Yeah. And of course, I can't help mentioning, and I have mentioned several times, that my latest book, Diary of a Psychosis, features a foreword by Jay Bhattacharya, who is now very likely to be the director of the National Institutes of Health. I mean, that is crazy to me.
Great. Yeah.
That the previous people were all terrible disasters who foisted this stuff on us. And the new guy he wrote a foreword to like one of the most devastating critiques of the whole thing. I mean, It's incredible to live in this timeline, really.
It is. And I look at RFK, and then I go back and look at pictures of me and him together at a Ron Paul Institute conference where he gave an amazing 2021, he gave an incredible speech at our DC conference, and it's astounding to see these people. So I almost don't want to praise them because I don't want the bad guys to hear us praise him. See, even Woods likes him.
Yeah.
He's a bad guy.
Yeah, so far it hasn't been a problem. I used to be that way, but then I realized, but so far it hasn't been a problem. It would be hilarious if there's a confirmation hearing or any kinds of hearing. I don't know if you have that for NIH or not, but if somebody brings this in and says, "What are you doing endorsing this extremist?" then big trouble. Diaryofcovid.com, by the way, is the website where I actually, you can obviously get the book on Amazon, but I actually sell it at cost plus shipping. I don't make any profit on it. It's the cheapest way to get it, directly from me, diaryofcovid.com. So that book is therapy, by the way, I'm telling you. Oh, thank you. They really was for me too, writing it.
I read it, and I just, as much as I don't want to go back, it's like peeling the scab off of a wound. You kind of almost have to do that. And I love the format of that book.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Simple. It really is what it says. It's a diary.
And that was, I came up, I'm not always a good title guy, Daniel. I mean, I have a book called 33 Questions About American History You're Not Supposed to Ask. So I am a terrible title guy.
Oh,
so when I came up with Diary of a Psychosis, I thought, I'm not going to write any more books. I'm going to go out on a high note. That's the best title I've ever come up with because it's perfect for what it is.
I thought you were coming out with a heavy metal album when I saw that. I thought, wow, Woods is really going to town.
That's right. And I was saying I was on Spaces with Josie the other day, but I like it was my idea for the cover design to look like this really stark white on black with the old timey 1950s typewriter font. So that it looks like somebody has literally written up your psychiatric profile,
Absolutely.
Just crazy.
Yeah.
So I want to take a minute, if we may, to say something about the Ron Paul Institute, because it's very, very important to me that the legacy of Ron Paul live on because of the things that he's done for us and the battles that he's fought when he didn't have to fight them. In his early 70s, nobody would have begrudged Ron Paul a quiet retirement. I mean, he doesn't want to. Who wants to deal with the smears and the attacks and just the exhaustion of presidential campaigns over and over? And I keep mentioning that he would tell me that he just doesn't sleep well in hotels, and you're in a lot of hotels when you're going around doing this. He did all this stuff for us, and he did it because he believed in the idea. He didn't do it for himself. You almost never, ever, ever hear him say, "I." As your president, he just didn't talk like that. That's just not his way. So I believe deeply in his message, and I've been very happy to be able to work with him, of course, on the homeschool program. But he has an institute named after him, and that should go on. I don't mean to speak like he's passed on, but my point is, his name should be a presence in the public square for generations to come because of the importance of what he has to say. And so the existence of the Ron Paul Institute is an attempt to do that, to carry on that legacy. Now, the trouble is that when you have an institute as opposed to a presidential campaign, it's not as sexy. People don't say, "Oh, I have to immediately write you a check." Whereas they see Ron Paul in the GOP debates and they think, "Where's my checkbook? Go get it. I'll send it to you." But way more efficient than campaign funds are institute funds. And those flashes of brilliance that we had, those wonderful moments that I'll never forget in those presidential campaigns, those were wonderful and to be cherished and held in our hearts forever. But what we have now is the Ron Paul Institute itself that needs to continue, that does very important work, and it needs to continue. But with an institute, as I say, people don't think, well, let me go give a big check to the Ron Paul Institute. But you should, because this is the thing. The presidential campaign is going to come and go. This is the thing that's going to last. And it will last only if people get those checkbooks out. So, sorry, Daniel. I think I'm giving your message here. But
thank you so much. It's You did it perfectly. Thank you so much. It's absolutely true.
This was uncoordinated, by the way. If you're a homeschooling parent, chances are you're working too hard. You've probably heard me talk about the K through 12 video-based self-taught Ron Paul curriculum. I devoted 2 years of my life to creating videos on history and government for that curriculum. So your students will learn directly from me on those subjects. And we have all the traditional subjects, but we also teach things that you would think they would teach in the traditional schools, but for some reason they don't. Like money management. Think people could stand to learn that? Or how to run a home business, or how to be an effective public speaker, how to be a well-rounded person, in other words. The middle school science courses the kids absolutely rave about. A lot of times they finish them early and say, can I go on to the 7th grade? Can I go on to the 8th grade? Well, I also have some bonuses for you. If you join the Ron Paul curriculum through my link, I'll give you $160 worth of free bonuses, and you won't get those bonuses anywhere else. You gotta get them through my link only. And my link is ronpaulhomeschool.com. Head over there, get more information, and sign on up and get those bonuses. It's ronpaulhomeschool.com.
I love what you said about, a little goes a long way. I mean, campaigns, the money is wasted. With us, it's not a penny is wasted. If anyone thinks it might be wasted, come check out our building in Clute. You'll realize immediately.
So what are the kinds of things? Obviously you have the Ron Paul Liberty Report, but what else do you do?
Well, we have the whole sort of mission statement of the Ron Paul Institute is bringing people together. The inspiration for starting the Institute, aside from Ron Paul's legacy and his ability to continue getting his message out, was, if you remember, I think it was after the 2008 campaign, when he got together with the minor candidates, and they all agreed on a few basic things: stop deficit spending, stop intervention overseas, audit and end the Fed, all of these things, from the progressives like Cynthia McKinney to remind me of the Constitution Party, Chuck Baldwin. That's a broad spectrum. And they all agreed on these few basic things. So the idea is, the things we agree on, let's work together. The things that divide us, let's keep our tongues bitten and not irritate each other. People have been, I'll tell you something, people have been angry at us for being positive about some aspects of the Trump campaign and pre-election, activities. They said, don't you know that he's Ron Paul's been bringing people together for his entire life. First as a doctor, literally, but now, in terms of policy, that's what we do. Find things that you can work together on and do them. So that's the philosophical impetus of it. So what we do is we have terrific conferences every year. We do one usually down here in Texas and then one in DC. We've had great people. We've had Julian Assange speak. We've had Judge Napolitano. We've had Colonel McGregor speak, RFK. So Thomas Massey, who's on our board, have spoken. So that's what we do when people get together and magic happens. But we also do the Ron Paul Scholar Seminar, which is very important, as we bring together upper division undergrads and grad students for a boot camp of a day in getting lectures from great libertarians like Jacob Hornberger, Thomas Massey. The keynote this past year was Judge Napolitano. And the kids, I shouldn't call them kids, but they seem like kids to me. They go on to great things. TJ Roberts was in our first class, and now he's elected to the state legislature in Kentucky. A great young man with a big promising future, and a lot of the other young people are doing that. So we're investing in the future and want to continue doing so.
Oh, how about you have a student program of some kind?
Yeah, that's the Scholar Seminar.
Okay.
That's the Scholar Seminar, and we bring them together. They come to the conference. They take a hard day before, having lectures throughout the day. Things that you'll appreciate this, Tom, things that their professors aren't telling them. Here's the real scoop, guys. And it's not just people studying politics. We've had a lot of med students, people that you would be surprised. Why are you interested in this? But we take them all and they walk away. We've gotten so many wonderful letters from them about the things how much they've appreciated. It just takes one day. I'd like to expand it. It was modeled on Mises University, which I think they do a great job. And ours is a smaller scale version of that. So if the funds were there, we would expand it. We would invest in future generations. It's the best investment you can make.
Yeah, without a doubt it is. We have we definitely have more people, younger people, who have come through the Mises program, who who understand things better and are able to get that message out to the public. I see it a lot. I say, I know this really articulate kid. I met him at Mises U.
Yes.
And so they tend to have a disproportionate impact because they really understand it. They didn't just read 3 articles on the internet.
Yeah. And in fact, we've had a lot of Mises U students come through our program. It's to be honest, it's probably a leg up when I see that on the application. I think, okay, this is a level-headed person. They don't make mistakes over there on these kids.
You're right. Yeah. So you can kind of piggyback off the admission decisions of the Mises Institute people.
Yeah, and we actively seek their students, their graduates too.
Yeah, that's tremendous. Now, Dr. Paul being 89 probably doesn't do as much traveling as he used to, but yet I do still feel like I'm hearing about him occasionally going here and there. I mean, is he still doing that?
He does travel. He travels to DC every year. We have a wonderful, generous benefactor who takes Dr. Paul with him in his plane to DC. But we were just in Colorado a couple of months ago. We had like a 4-hour flight and a 4-hour drive through the mountains.
Oh my!
I didn't know if he should do it, but he did it, and he gave a great talk just to a bunch of average folks, and they really enjoyed it. He's done a lot of these things over the past year or so.
Well, let's see. Here we are at the end of, I don't know, what are we in, like the second week of December 2024, and what we've seen over the past, I would say eight years has been, whether people acknowledge it or not, and some of them are starting to acknowledge it, is that some of the things that Ron Paul was, quote unquote, a little too early in saying are now finally being absorbed into the consciousness of, let's say, young, whatever you want to call it, they're anti-leftist, whatever different name you want to give them. But I sent you this link and then you used it, but you remember this clip from an early Ron Paul presidential debate where, was it Chris Wallace, that snake, was asking him about all the different agencies he wanted to close. And the way he was wording the question was to make him sound ridiculous, because we all know nobody in his right mind would want to close all these wonderful agencies, because it says right there on their website that they're working for the common good. It says it right there. I just read it. Or that he would want to shut down the FBI. Like that, I don't know if you still believe that. Well, now today, being against the FBI is like a commonplace among, younger folks, smarter folks. And you hear like people who are, way right of center talking about, we have to stop the endless wars. They're using the word warmonger. They use warmonger all the time. That came out of him giving them permission. You're not, it doesn't make you a leftist to be against the U.S. empire, right? It does not. It is perfectly consistent with all your other opinions. And now suddenly that has gotten through. Now, I will say that I'm not quite sure that these new ideas in these people's minds have been fully battle tested. That if there were another terrorist attack in the U.S., if all of a sudden this would all go out the window and let's go to war with 18 countries. We would have to wait and see, and hope we never have to wait and see that.
Yeah.
But all the same, they're talking in ways in which they were not talking 10 years ago. And I am firmly convinced that that is a result of the influence of Ron Paul, which is why, again, the Ron Paul Institute must endure. So what do you think about what I just said?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you just Google Ron Paul was right, you'll get 8 million. It's borne out by polls. I mean, we talk a lot about polls on the show. And if you look at young people, how they feel about U.S. military aid to Ukraine, U.S. military being sent to the Middle East, man, young Republicans are so solidly against it. I never thought I would see it. I mean, it's astonishing. Back when I was working for Dr. Paul on the Hill, I was tasked with putting together guests for the Thursday lunch, where Republicans would come in and talk about the Iraq War and their misgivings about it in private. And at that time, it was very private because Republicans weren't speaking out about it. You were afraid you'd get primaries, something terrible will happen. But you're right, it's mainstream. Hey, what, man, you're not against the FBI? What's wrong with you? It's astonishing to see.
Yeah, it's encouraging, given that we have so much against us. We have the official opinion molders and all these old legacy institutions lined up against us. And so to have, I mean, these are victories. To have victories like this is encouraging. It means that it's not in vain. And there are people on our side of things who I think are so, understandably so ground down by how seemingly insuperable the obstacles are. You know, like this is insurmountable, it looks like. And they're just tired of losing and having their faces ground into the dirt. So some of these people become discouraging themselves, and they try to act like nothing has changed. But that's not so. Things indeed have changed. And again, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, I think people probably assume that because we're talking about Ron Paul, and he's a huge name we all respect, that if he opens up something like the Ron Paul Institute, it's automatically successful, and it's just swimming in money, and you don't have to worry about it. But the thing is, these institutions that we love, like the Mises Institute and the Ron Paul Institute, they survive and thrive because somebody stops and says, wait a minute, instead of assuming that somebody else is going to be the benefactor for this thing, maybe I better be a benefactor of this thing. You know, it's that pattern interrupt where you realize I really benefit from this thing. And it just occurred to me that if it weren't for other private actors doing something, I wouldn't even have it. And so I hope that at the end of this calendar year, you guys are all thinking about, well, what's a trustworthy place where I can entrust my money and know that it's going to a good cause that I believe in? Well, what better one than one that has Ron Paul's own name on it? So I intend to do likewise, and I hope people listening and watching will do the same. Everything counts. A small donation, they'll love it. A large donation, they may love a slight bit more, but the people they all love equally. They're all egalitarians over at the Ron Paul Institute. But the website is ronpaulinstitute.org, and I strongly urge you guys to make sure this thing carries on well into the future. Daniel, any final words?
Well, Tom, I just can't thank you enough for being so kind to push it. As you know, people think with the name that it's automatic. It's not automatic. It takes a lot of work, you know, so I appreciate it so much.
Well, it's always a pleasure to be able to catch up with you, Daniel. I wish you lived in Florida. If you were my next door neighbor, we would be inseparable.
That would be awesome.
Sitting out in my backyard, drinking scotch, every single night. But that's the way it could. But it's better for my liver that you and I don't live together, I suppose.
That's probably true. Probably true.
Thanks again, Daniel.
Thanks so much, Tom.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com, and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.